People give sins colors. A little white sin, black sin, red sin. Don't matter. Say to my servant who has transgressed the bounds, who has oppressed himself, do not be in despair of Allah's mercy. Allah commands us, don't be in despair of Allah's mercy. Don't think that Allah will not forgive you. Don't think that Allah will not have mercy on you. Don't do what Allah has commanded us. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jamiyan. Indeed, Allah forgives all sin. Name it. Name it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says about Himself, Innahu huwa al-ghafur rahim. Indeed, Allah, He is all forgiving, all forgiving. He'll forgive you continuously, even if you keep slipping into the same sin and you come back to Allah after that sin every single time, seeking His mercy, seeking His forgiveness. With sincerity, Allah will forgive you. Know that He is all forgiving and most merciful. Allahu Akbar. So false security and despair is not from the characteristics of the believers. It's not from us. With this understood, it's known that Ahlul Qibla, what is their attitude? When that's understood, what is the attitude of the people of the Qibla? How should they be? You're saying that we don't live in a place or a house of false security nor despair. So what's our attitude? Our attitude is between two pillars. Khawf wal raja'. It's between two pillars. Fear and hope. This is the characteristic of Ahlul Qibla. Between fear and hope. This is how we live. This is how we think. This is how we believe. Fear and hope is our characteristic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He praises these two characteristics, fear and hope. He praises them in the Quran. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in Surah Az-Zumar, ayat 9, Qala Allah ta'ala, Amman huwa qanitun anna'a al-layl, sajidan wa qa'iman yahdharu al-akhirata wa yarjuna rahmatallahi, wa yarjuna rahmatal rabbih. Allahu Akbar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, and whoever is obedient from my servants, and they stand at night, and they make sujood, they are prostrate, and they stand in qiyam, meaning in the prayer late at night, and they fear, listen, and they fear, Allahu Akbar, the hereafter. And He said, وَيَرْجُونَ رَحْمَةً رَبِّهِ, and they have hope in the mercy of their Lord. Those people who they are obedient to Allah, and they stand at night, and they make sujood, and they stand in qiyam, and they fear the hereafter, and they have hope in Allah's mercy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ إِنَّمَا يَتَذَكَّرُونَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. Allahu Akbar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He then says, after mentioning that statement, He gives another beautiful example. He says, are those who know like those who don't know? Is there a comparison between those who know, who have knowledge of Islam? We're not talking about mathematics. We're not talking about engineering. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the deen of Islam. But of course it could include that. So Allah says, are those who know like those who don't know? Now look at the example He gave first. Is the one who is obedient to Allah and stands at night and makes sajda, make qiyam. He fears the hereafter and he hopes for the mercy of his Lord. Is he like the one who doesn't do it? No, there's no comparison. That that person is better. So here in this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is praising those people who possess the two characteristics of fear and hope, because there's no one like them except the people who are doing what they are doing. Allahu Akbar. It's high status that Allah mentions these two characteristics and the people who possess it, or them in this case. Upon understanding that, Imam Ali ibn Abi al-Izz al-Hanafi, he said in his book, Sharh al-Aqidah al-Tahawiyah, the Muqtasid, in the abridged version, he says, so now the slave understands that he or she has two characteristics, and that he or she, they live in between these two states and they remain there. Where does the believer dwell? Between fear and hope. And they don't leave. They don't go to the right. They don't go to the left. They remain upon fear and hope. Allahu Akbar. He said, when we look at what proper fear is, the proper type of fear, the correct type of fear, the praiseworthy fear. When we look at what praiseworthy fear is, he says it is the type of fear that becomes a barrier between the believer and those things that are forbidden. You heard this? Correct taqwa becomes a barrier between the believer and those things that are forbidden. Taqwa comes between the believer and zina, fornication. It comes between him and lying. It comes between him and slandering. It comes between him and backbiting. It comes between him and smoking. It comes between him and that thing, those things that are forbidden. Taqwa, true fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ مَخْرَجًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, look, whoever fears Allah, he will make a way for them out of no way. Whoever fears Allah, and there's something haram calling him, but he fears Allah, Allah will make a way. Allah will make a way for him to avoid it. Allah will make a way for him or her to stay away from it. Allah will make a way for them, as taqwa becomes a barrier between them and the haram. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, increase us in a taqwa. Ameen. The Shaykh, he said, now remember, that's the blessed or the praiseworthy type of fear. He said the blameworthy type of fear, the type of fear that we should not have, he says, is excessive fear. Excessive fear. He said this type of fear causes a person to fall into despair, that they become so afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This fear causes them to think that Allah won't forgive them. That's excessive. They jumped off the boat. It's too far. That's not proper. It's not proper to think that Allah won't forgive you. You are supposed to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are supposed to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu wattaqullaha haqqa tuqatih wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, oh, you believe, fear Allah, and don't you dare die except in a state of Islam. Allah commands us to fear him. You're supposed to fear him, but correctly. Not with ghulu, not excessively. Not excessively. Because that type of excessive fear will cause a person to commit suicide. Because they fall into a state of hopelessness. There's no hope for me. I'm done. So they put a gun to their head. Because of the despair, they do a bigger sin.